So Dr. Jefferson is the CEO of Cambia, a world top 100 NGOs by the Global Journal 2012. In 2003, Rachel was named by the Scientific American to the list of the world 50 most influential technologists, cited as the world research leader for 2003 for economic development. In 2005, Rachel was awarded the leadership in science. In 2009, with the funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Rachel became professor of science, technology, and law at the Queensland University of Technology, and the founding director of the Initiative for Open Innovation. Let's welcome Rachel to give the talk.
Could you invoke Chrome on that for me, please, if you have it? Yeah. Thank you. I'm also not going to use the speaking tools. I want to talk a little bit about one of the fundamental W's of entrepreneurism that we haven't discussed, I think, enough today, and I hope we do. And that's why. Why you bother to do it at all. If you're entrepreneurial, it's always worth asking, what are you hoping to do? What outcome do you want to achieve? I'm not talking about what process you want to have fun with, how much you want to feather your narcissistic tendencies, but what do you want to achieve? Ultimately, if it's money, I'm not really interested in talking to you. If it's impact, those few of you where that's interesting, I want to talk to you. And the rest of you just be polite for a while. If you think about our world as we see it now, do most of you believe that there is climate change happening? Or plenty of deniers amongst you? Or most people think climate change is a serious issue? How about hunger? There's about 1 billion people that are not getting enough food today. And another 1 billion that are getting the wrong food today. That's 2 billion people malnourished. So the planet's melting. A good third of the world is malnourished one way or another. Most of the productive farmland in the world is being paved over or degraded. Our water resources are drying up. And most importantly, those of us who are in a position to solve problems are a smaller and smaller component of society. Science and technology is one of the most beautiful tools that has ever been developed in civilization. And yet the use of that by the broader canvas of society is smaller and smaller, not larger and larger. So looking at the magnitude of the problems that we have in society and in the planet, is the solution going to be from someone like us fixing malaria, fixing farming, fixing this? Or is it going to be from some of us having enough generosity of spirit and entrepreneurism to think about how to be a social entrepreneur? How can we broaden the demographic of entrepreneurs? Because that, in fact, is a very exciting kind of entrepreneurism, to enable other people. We are so often obsessed by the question of us, the me, the im, but do a topological inversion and it becomes a we. As a biological scientist, I'm a molecular biologist, and I started inventing technologies over 30 years ago that have gone on to be very prominent in agriculture, covering 100 million hectares of the world with these technologies. And I must say that the journey I have taken has been one of gradually converting my obsession with myself into realizing that the pleasure of being an entrepreneur can be enhanced by caring about other people. This is not about becoming altruistic. It's becoming aware of how much pleasure you can receive by enabling other people's success, not just your own. So you can be successful by creating success. And that is itself an exciting bit of entrepreneurism I'd like to talk to you about. How do you do that? In the last decade or so, there's been a phenomenon called social entrepreneurism that has become recognized as such, and it's a field that is, in my view, long overdue for recognition. About a decade ago, I was invited by the World Economic Forum's founder, Klaus Schwab, into a remarkable induction class of a foundation called the Schwab Foundation, modestly enough, for social entrepreneurism. And in that capacity, I began to meet other people around the world who were similarly obsessed by the idea of enabling other people's success. A social enterprise can be thought of as a business where it starts and finishes with an outcome, not a process. If you start your business with a social outcome in mind, reduce poverty, change the engagement in land rights, almost anything, that outcome will be nimbly attacked by any set of business metrics you can develop and any set of business processes. That's social entrepreneurism, in which you actually have to develop your skills to achieve an outcome, not find an outcome that matches your skills. dramatically different approach. And it's passionately exciting because the people around you are similarly visionary. Well, we talk so easily about vision in entrepreneurism and innovation, but in fact, mostly it's a vision about ourselves. It's a vision about the metrics we can grab onto, and mostly those metrics are really poor. Money is one of the most misleading metrics in business. People who look for the money early on in businesses are almost certainly going to be making mistakes. My sense is that it's a surrogate metric, a replacement metric for something much more important, which is our own self-worth, which we don't know how to value. We don't know how to wrap it up and say, are we getting better at this? But we actually kind of do. We just don't trust it enough. So I would encourage you to think about the following, and I'm going to give you about a 5 or 10 minute journey that I've taken so you can find metaphors there. See if there's anything that's resonant. Because social entrepreneurism has been, for me, a renaissance in my thinking about innovation. When I started as a biotechnologist about 35 years ago, or actually more, unfortunately, I was in on the dawn of recombinant DNA. I thought it was called recumbent DNA, so I thought it would be fun to join. It was back in 1974 in the University of California. There were a couple of labs inventing this tool for breaking and rejoining DNA with the idea that we could eventually treat it as an engineering discipline, not simply an observational discipline. And I was an 18-year-old dishwasher in the laboratory of one of the 2 or 3 places that invented the technology. It was a heady time and very exciting, but one of the things I learned early on was that competition is too often invoked too early as being a critical part of producing an innovation. It turns out cooperation is a far more important criterion. And if you look at the evolution of that field of science that went on to give rise to huge changes in biomedicine and agriculture, it was largely because of sharing, not because of owning. Intellectual property is an issue, but more importantly is that there is a commons that people can build from. We're here at a university. Traditionally, over the last 1,000 years, certainly several hundred years, universities were associated with creating a knowledge commons that we could all non-rivalrously draw from. That has started to degrade only in the last 50 years, and especially in the last 30 years, where now the knowledge itself is surrounded by rights that say, you may not use this, you may not use this. And when the default becomes mine and not ours, it's very difficult to build a nourishing ecology for entrepreneurism, and especially one that tries to solve fundamental problems of the demographics and the social justice of solving problems. So when I started working on inventing technologies for genetic engineering of crop plants, it turned out that my original vision was to develop tools that would allow us to build far better rice, or wheat, or corn, or cotton. And early on I began to realize, but that's an impossible task for a single person to take. If I set out iconically to develop a laboratory or a company, and I say I'm going to develop a drought-resistant rice or corn, I have what's known as a linear effect. Whatever I do has a linear effect. If I say, what tool is necessary for 1,000 other companies to develop drought-resistant rice and corn? Then you have a multiplier. Then you look at the demographics. So for about 15 years, I spent much of my life traveling throughout Asia to every laboratory that did rice genetics, troubleshooting it for the Rockefeller Foundation, developing technologies for rice genetics, and discovering that there were thousands of companies, laboratories, government institutions that knew more and cared more about those crops than I ever would. So what would my impact be? Well, if I can invent tools that make their jobs easier, more efficient, and more effective, then we will see massive progress. The outcome, we will see dramatically enhanced agricultural productivity or sustainability. So my impact could be by focusing on an outcome, opportunistically deciding that the way forward is enabling a commons of capability to enable other companies, to enable other institutions to do their job better. Part of this work also was engaging with the complexity of innovation. First of all, invention, whether it's a spherical doodad or whatever else, is not an innovation. The way an economist would use the term innovation, it's an economically productive, not always successful, but an economically productive intervention of something new. So an invention may be a piece of that, but an innovation assumes you take it through to some level of a marketplace. That marketplace may be a social marketplace as much as a financial marketplace, but it must be evaluated and potentially used by people.